Morning everyone. This is like being at a party with all your best friends. It's great. So many of you walk in and it's so lovely to see you again. So I'm really excited to be here. You'll have heard there a little bit of music from the Beatles. Some of you, not many of you, will remember the Beatles, but the song is called Eleanor Rigby, and there's a line in the song that says, Eleanor Rigby wearing a face that she keeps in a mask, wearing a face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? And that's inspired our debate this morning. So please welcome on stage very carefully our three panellists. So cunningly disguised as Baby Spice, Nelson Mandela and the Prime Minister, let me ask our panellists first of all to introduce themselves to you. Prime Minister, if we could start with you, could you tell us who you really are?
Okay, I'm actually Deborah Rowland. I'm the head of property asset management from the Ministry of Justice. This is my boss, actually, so I thought that mark was quite an interesting one. I've been in FM for 20 odd years, I've been in FM for 20 odd years and spanned the whole entire industry, really, from the public sector, the private sector, from the consulting side, supplier side. So I feel like I've got a good all-round experience to bring to the panel today.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Mandela, tell us who you really are.
If only I could do the accent. Julie Kortens, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Head of Corporate Services at Channel 4 at the moment. I actually leave in March. I'm going off to do my own thing and so excited about it. I'm also Chairman of the BIFM. I've been in FM for more years than I care to remember. Prior to that, I was in HR. Absolutely passionate about the wonderful world of FM. You can't stop me talking about it. I think it's absolutely amazing, and it's a thrill to be here today.
Thank you. And our Spice Girl, our whole sort of women in FM contingent today, Mark.
Yeah, I chose Baby Spice because I just realised I'm the only gentleman on the panel, which is great. I'm Mark Bell. I head up facilities for Facebook in the UK. I've also moved from corporate to social media now as well, so I feel that I've got a good balance on both sides of the spectrum in FM.
Brilliant. So you're all very welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. So what we're going to do for the next half hour or so is really discuss what faces we wear in the workplace and do we adapt our style to suit the people we're with. We'll also then have some time at the end of this session for your questions, because I know you'll have some burning issues you want to throw to our panel. So question to the panellists first of all is, do you wear different masks at work? Debbie, let's come to you first.
Absolutely, and actually having this mask is, well, he's one of my key stakeholders. So I have to deal very upstream with people like this and a lot of the ministers, clearly. But also downstream, and I deal, on the ground with people that are managing frontline operations in prisons, in courts, dealing with day-to-day issues with day-to-day public sector. So absolutely, you have to really be able to face both ways and be able to communicate at levels to meet all of those different parameters.
Julie, what about you? Can you give us an example, Julie, of where maybe it's gone well and perhaps one where it hasn't gone so well?
I'd start by saying I'm slightly different, I think, from Deborah. I am me. Doesn't matter who I'm talking to, where I am me. But the time that I wear a mask is when I'm personally facing issues. So I'm having a particularly bad day personally, and there's a gentleman in the audience today who I won't mention, and I was talking to him about some of the things we've gone through, the adversity we face. But you go into work and you have a team that you have to motivate, and you keep that personal side to yourself. You have the smile, you meet and greet everybody, you're friendly, you're welcoming, and you are encouraging them to develop and to deliver. That's when I think fundamentally I wear a mask in order to help and get the most out of other people.
Mark, what about you? Do you wear different masks with different people?
Yeah, sure. At Facebook, the demographic of the office is so diverse. You're dealing with some quite high-level senior executives for a global business, but then also some very junior software engineers whose social interactions come unnatural. So you have to find a different way to get your point across and make sure that you're factoring in both sides of that. That's developed a long way since I've worked at Facebook. You've had to adjust and be tactical where you can.
So Mark, how do you learn to do that?
For me, personally, it was just through perseverance and time. I sat down on the engineering floor to better understand how they worked. I sat there for a good 6 months to really understand them as people and how I could improve their working environment. It was a really challenging scenario. It wasn't an office that I've managed before. They chase each other with Nerf guns and fire. But then if there's an issue with the air conditioning or there's something on their desk that isn't right, it hinders their day. I mean, they don't stop until that problem is solved, and that's just, their mindset is completely different to anybody else I've worked with in the past. So yeah, it definitely took time to embed myself in that team and really understand what it was that made them tick.
Debbie, back to you. What do we do when there isn't time to sort of, go and sit with the department for 6 months? You've got so many stakeholders. How did you learn how best to deal with them?
Well, I think it's a bit of what Mark just said. You do have to spend time at all those places. So I've spent times in prisons. I've spent time. I did actually ask to stay overnight to test out what it was like, but they wouldn't let me. But also, I have stayed overnight in a judge's lodging, which is very nice. So you do have to actually live it and live and breathe it. Exactly what Mark said. So you have to see what is it that people experience. So if they're going through a court process, what is it that the general public will experience going through that process. So I live it, I walk through that. But equally, I have to go and spend time in a minister's office, sitting with a private office. How do they work? It's such a different world. And how do they work? And if I need to get something across to them, how's the best way for me to get that point across to them? Which won't be the way you'd think it is, because they do work in a very different way. So you have to spend time with people and understand how that works to really get the best out of them.
Julie, you look like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, no, sorry. I don't disagree with anything that my colleagues are saying here. For me, it's a little bit more about language and the language we're using, and that's what your must becomes. So absolutely, you've got people at different levels doing different things, and you have different terminology. It's no different than talking to a child in child's language. There's no point using long words they won't understand. So I get that when you're talking to a minister, depending on the minister, you might have to still use small words, or it depends who the minister is. So yeah, we absolutely adapt our style. I think what I was saying earlier was, what I won't do is compromise who I am. I will talk differently. I will I'm deferential to everybody. I'm polite to everybody, and I hope I'm welcoming and friendly to everybody. But there's a time and place for joviality. There's a time and place for sarcasm. There's a time and place for all of these different things. And for me, that is what your mask really is. It's understanding and tempering your own behaviour depending on the person who's on the receiving end.
What happens, though, when you're in a room full of people and they're all different? So you might have, a senior person, you might have a finance person, some of your frontline FM people. How do you deal with that, Julie? Well,
again, it's that middle ground. It's quite interesting. If I think of an anecdote, I went into a board meeting at Channel 4, and I was talking about a particular refurbishment project, and I was talking about the QS who'd been working with me. And I remember the CFO at the time saying to me, Julie, I didn't understand a word you were saying. And it was a real lesson for me, because we naturally live in our own worlds. We naturally use our own jargon. So in a meeting of mixed people, it's using plain language, absolutely plain language that everybody can understand. Sometimes it's setting the scene so those people who haven't been with you on the journey can catch up with you. And again, sometimes that's the more senior people, not necessarily the junior people. The junior people will probably have been on the journey with you, but the senior person won't have been, so you're setting the scene for them as much as you are the people who've been with you.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the importance of language and using the right language with people. We've also talked about spending time in different departments to get to understand what people's needs are and what drives them. What else helps when we're talking about adapting?
I think Julie touched on this, and I think you do have to be truthful and honest with yourself, and you've got to have that. Unless you can come from an honest position and what you're trying to convey, people will see that, whoever you're talking to. So there's a real, truthfulness that needs to come out of what you're really trying to convey. So really about being honest from yourself, and you're trying to do the right thing. And I think people see that, whoever it is, they will see that. If you're honest and you can actually convey that honest message at different levels, people will get that and they'll see the passion and they'll see the realisation of it. So it's really about being honest.
For me, it's tact. I think that tact is probably secret weapon for any FM. If you there's a famous saying from Winston Churchill. I think it goes something. Tact is having the ability to tell somebody to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. And I think that that's really sort of apt for this topic. If a lot of the times FMs have to deliver difficult messages, but if you come from a good place and you share the reasons why you've led yourself to that decision, you tend to get those people on side, and the meeting that you thought was dreading in the calendar that week ends up being one of the best ones you've had.
So Mark, you talked about sharing reasons with people. What if you can't? What if it's either commercially sensitive or it has some HR implications? How do you handle that?
I think you just be open and give the reasons why you can't share that information. I think that if they're part of the organisation, that they should understand that there's some things that are sensitive that can't be shared. If there's commercial terms on a real estate deal that you won't want to be leaked to the market, or a potential negotiation that isn't finalised yet, that they should understand that in time, give them a deadline that you will be able to share this information in a matter of weeks or months if it needs to be. But keep them informed, let them know. If you don't give them any update or any information, then they'll assume that nothing's happening behind the scenes. So let them know the reasons why you can't share that information, and then make sure you do share it as soon as you possibly can.
I agree with both the honesty and the tact points that were there earlier, and just picking up there, taking through what Mark was saying. I think it's empathy as well. It's understanding where the other person sits. It's understanding what something matters to them, and wherever possible, putting yourself in their shoes. So on that very point, understanding what it's like for you when you feel the MD, the CEO, is not giving you information. How does it make you feel? And what would you like them to say? When you're delivering a difficult decision, how does that decision impact on the person you're speaking to? And you can then package that message in such a way that you're not making them more unhappy. You're actually identifying with where they're coming from and personalising it and having that empathy. And I think that makes a difference.
I would just completely agree with that. Empathy was something I would have said as well. It's about what motivates people. What do they need to get out of where you're at the moment? What do they need to get out of that meeting? What do they need to get out of that situation? Everyone's going to come from it from a different angle, having the best understanding of where they're coming from, being prepared, understanding their motivations. If you've got that empathy, then you're a long way in.
Can any of you give us an example of when it's gone horribly wrong for you? Where you've thought you really got the measure of someone, perhaps in a meeting or a particular situation, and it didn't work, and tell us what you learned from it. We're talking about honesty here, aren't we?
I'm just thinking, there may have been many occasions. I've got to think about the one.
Yeah. There's been a few examples for me. I think a lot of the time it was one of actually my first, probably in the first month of my new role at Facebook a few years ago now. I presented this very well thought out presentation of how I can achieve cost savings throughout the next 5 to 10 years and year-on-year savings, how great I could be as an FM for this organisation. My boss wrote back in a very one-line email, how long did this presentation take you to build? I was like, a couple of weeks. He's like, all that time you spent doing that, you wasn't doing your job. And it made me think. So I obviously brought that up in my next one-to-one, and he kind of shared, look, we're not in a situation where we're asking you to deliver cost efficiencies. I want you to go and create the office environment that the London team need, and you're spending your time building this presentation. So I mean, it's don't try to second guess what people want. Actually ask them what you want to be what they want you to work on, and deliver that. It's one of those things that that presentation is always there if we ever do need to drive those cost efficiencies. But at that particular time, he was more concerned that I was wasting my time doing something that wasn't adding that much value.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
For me, a key example of when something goes wrong is when I lose control of my own emotion. I am a very emotional person, a very passionate person, and sometimes that can get in the way. I could honestly say that probably only 3 times in my life have I really lost my temper. And that is not something I'm proud of. But I remember one person in particular. I was having quite a heated debate with him about his own performance. It just happened to be a guy at the time. And I was getting more and more wound up about what he was saying and how he was saying it. And he turned to me and he said, Julie, he said, why do you not like me? And I'm really, really embarrassed to say I shouted at him and said, because your opinion of you is up there and my opinion of you is down there. And now, 20 years later, I still remember it. I still remember being out of control. I still remember how I felt. I still remember that I did him no good at all. It's a long, long time ago. But by golly, I learned from it. And I learned that actually controlling myself is the only way I can get the best out of other people. It doesn't mean to say I'm not passionate. It doesn't mean to say I'm not emotional. But actually, my impact on others can cause them problems as well as me.
I think one of the lessons I learned is particularly when I joined government, and being passionate about FM like Julie and all of you are, a lot of you around the room are, it's something that we can write War and Peace on, particularly when we're trying to change something, change the way things are done. And my God, trying to change government is not an easy job. But, I was given that task. And so I was quite happy to go in on War and Peace, on how, what we needed to do in government to change FM and set a new direction. What I didn't get at that time is actually you can't do that with a minister. They have a very short window of opportunity, that you can only put it into really 2 pages. They get a briefing overnight in their box, and they need to get fully up to speed in very few words. And that's something I've had to learn. And it's the art of being pithy, which is something I've learned in government. Less is more. You can really get a point across in a few words, succinctly, rather than War and Peace and lots of jargon, which I think we all fall back on in FM quite easily.
Isn't it also, though, about, I know you say less is more, Debbie, but if we're talking with engineers, or I know I'm sort of pigeonholing people here, but people who like the lengthy explanation, is that different?
Yeah, that's different. And that's, getting back to who's your audience, who are you speaking to? If I'm talking to the engineers, we go straight into the jargon and we love it, and we're in that place. But yeah, if you're talking to a minister, you can't do that. So it's who the audience is, but hopefully you don't get the engineers and the ministers in the same room, because that is quite complicated. We try and keep the engineers out of the minister's way.
Okay, I think maybe this is an opportunity for us to throw some questions out to the audience. So, who wants to be the first to ask a question of our panel? So everyone, Craig, can you talk really loudly, or shall we bring you a microphone?
It's a very good question. We are very multicultural at Channel 4. We have people from all backgrounds, all levels of experience, and our ethos is you all matter. It doesn't matter who you are and what your contribution is, it matters. But there is, amongst certain cultures, a propensity to be deferential, to not raise your voice, to be, totally respectful. Something that I think actually sometimes the British culture has lost. And I found it's really important to help those particular individuals shine and develop. So one of the things I've learned to do, certainly in a meeting, is to come to those people last, so they've had time to formulate their view, they've had time almost to get permission to speak. They've got time to listen to what everybody else has said, and then you get the best out of them. So I absolutely agree that sometimes, depending on somebody's background and culture, we change our own behaviour to get the best out of them.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that, really. I can't think of any examples where culture was a key driver, but personality is just different between the whole group, and a lot of that can be from your culture or your upbringing. And you just have to adapt to that. Some people don't respond well to the good old-fashioned kick up the bum. Some people respond much better to an arm around the shoulder and a helping hand along the way. So you just have to spend time with each individual in the team and understand what works best for them and adapt your management style accordingly.
I mean, like Julie, we're in a multicultural organisation, so I don't think we should be treating anyone differently, but yeah, you do need to understand that there are some cultural differences, and it is about understanding what makes people work at the end of the day, and what's right for them. But it is more about, I think it's more about personality actually than culture, and different personalities require to be dealt with in different ways, and you need to really understand what works for them. A classic example for me is when we get a new minister in, which we've had this year in Justice. We had the minister before loved lots of tables and presentations and pictures. Our new minister hates that, and he likes everything in lots of prose and doesn't want any pictures. So you need to understand what works for them. So personalities are different, and it might be because that's culturally led or not, but it's about the personalities and what works for them.
And then the fun is, as Liz said earlier, you get several people in one meeting, all who want things in different ways. So I go back to our board meeting. Our chairman is ex-Treasury. He likes everything, graphical, figures, numbers. We've got the director of HR over here who doesn't want to look at figures and numbers, but wants to see how it looks and feels. So it's adapting everything that you do to ensure that there's something for everybody in your presentation or your speech or whatever it is.
I think that's one of the great benefits of FM at the moment. Some of the innovations that are coming in to support us from a technological point of view is some great sort of software systems that give us all the detail behind the scenes, but also give us almost a traffic light system for those of us who are very visual and don't want the detail. You can see at a glance whether your buildings are working or not. Okay. Next question. Nikki.
What's been the most challenging audience yet?
So Nikki's question is, what's been your most challenging audience yet? Obviously, apart from this one.
I was talking to Deborah and Mark about this earlier. I was on a panel, and forgive me, I know in the audience we potentially have more than one agent, but I was at an Estates Gazette conference speaking on a panel, and this is going to sound terrible, but I felt like every estate agent in the room had no sense of humour whatsoever. And it didn't matter what I said or how I said it, and I was very light-hearted and made some sort of quirky comments. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And when you're standing on a panel and there's no reaction, there's no smiles, there's absolutely nothing, it is one of the worst feelings you can ever have, because you're sitting there thinking, I want this to end, I want the hole to open up and for me to fall in it. But at the end of the day, when everybody gave their feedback, they said that the panel I was on was one of the most interactive and enjoyable of the day. So you just can't tell. If there's no reaction, it doesn't mean to say they're not enjoying it. So, no reaction.
One of the hardest ones for me was when I joined MOJ and I took on a team of 200 people, and they'd been through lots of change, and it was kind of like, yeah, who are you? What are you going to do? And so, instantly going into that and trying to win them over, it's not easy. You can't do it on day one, absolutely not. It takes time. But going into a position where, I'd just literally taken over this team, had to present to them, a room full of very sour faces and weren't really behind me at all. So, that's taken a long time to build that. I'm probably going through that again very shortly with another 200 odd people that are coming from the Home Office. So I've got lots of lessons learned from that. So yeah, it's tough because you've got to earn the respect of people, especially when you're leading a large team that have been through lots of change before and seen it all before.
For me, it's something that we do at Facebook every Friday is something called Drink and Tell, where no, it's actually called Drink and Tell, where on a Friday at 5 o'clock everybody is welcome to come to the restaurant and have a beer or a wine, and there's presentations throughout to tell people what people have been working on that week. And quite recently we've been driving a lot of change at Facebook as we're going through big growth, and I had to do a slot called Ask Me Anything, where you had to stand up in front of the whole business, and similar to this, but they can really keep you on your toes. They fire personal questions at you. They fire really challenging work questions that you probably shouldn't share, but in front of the whole office, you're asked to share that relevant information. So that's a really challenging environment to be in, and you have to be confident enough to stand up behind your department and what you believe in and give concise answers. But yeah, it's a really challenging thing for any FM, I think, to just be stand up and warts and all, this is what we're doing, any questions, and then have to think on your feet as they come at you thick and fast. But yeah, that's definitely one of the most challenging meetings I've been in.
I think as people working in FM, we tend to be behind the scenes, and we tend to be much more comfortable there. And actually being on a stage like this, or being, at your drink and tell. We say don't drink and tweet. That's what we say in our house, or Facebook, obviously. It's difficult in our industry to sort of find that confidence to stand up and have the questions fired at you. So even though these guys make it look really easy, it's not. It takes a lot of preparation. If I can just answer Nikki's question as well, a couple of weeks ago I was invited back to my old school to talk to the sixth form. I haven't been back to school for 30 years. I know you'll find that hard to believe. Okay, that didn't work very well. So I went back to talk to the girls in the sixth form, and I was really nervous. So I've talked at events where there are thousands of people, and I love it. But talking to 16 and 17-year-old girls, and there were about 50 of them, and they were very different at that age to how we were at 16, 17. And I got myself really worked up about it. And once I'd started talking to them and realised I needed to take all the masks off and not try and be their friend or their mother or a 17-year-old and just be myself, it went really well. So I think there are circumstances like that where you really just have to be completely authentic, warts and all, and and share your successes and your failures. So that was my one. So next question. Oh, it's all so quiet. Oh.
What do you prepare for meetings? Is there anything special that you go through in it and gathering competence, etc.? Or are you kind of wing it to a certain extent?
So let me just repeat Nikki's question, just in case people at the back didn't hear. She's saying, what do the panel do to prepare for meetings? How do they get themselves ready? Is there any sort of secrets to that preparation? Mark?
I think it does change. I think there's an element of winging it in FM everywhere.
You said that. We don't do that.
But I tend to, if I'm going into a presentation or a meeting with senior management, I go in with the end goal there before I start the meeting. What would I like to get out of this situation? And focus on that during the meeting. If we ever go off topic or off point, if people are getting bogged down into the detail, I always try to steer it back into, we need to come to a decision on one of these topics. And I make sure that the presentation sides in the way of the driving that forward to the end goal that I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, it is a good mix, but you do get called into impromptu meetings where you do just have to wing it occasionally. So I think a good mix of both.
I agree. I think there's an element of winging it, but actually, I think government loves a meeting. Oh my God, they like having lots of them, and that's one thing I've learned. I don't just go to meetings now because I could just spend my entire life just going to meetings for no real value. So actually, it's about the ones you go to, and you choose the ones you go to, and the ones you go to, you do know what you want from the outcome, which you're absolutely right. So don't just go to a meeting and turn up because actually, what you're doing there just a waste of everyone's time, really. So choose your meetings.
Sorry, I'm sat here smiling because I'm presenting at 12 o'clock and two of my slides, one of them's about winging it and one of them is about something else you've already mentioned. So I'm saying nothing for now.
The company I used to work for before I set up on my own, we had this fantastic little piece of kit, and it was a little bit like the clock in the top right-hand corner. I'm sure some of you use it in meetings. What you do is you put in the average cost of those people in the meeting, and every minute the clock ticks, then the cost comes up. So it keeps people really focused. So if a meeting is costing, for every minute, it's costing something like £17,000 of people's time and cost to the business, then it keeps people really focused. We also started our meetings at 7 minutes past the hour, just so that we didn't fill an hour just because we had to, because it was in the diary. So there's lots of little techniques, I think, that we can use for meetings. Okay.
How do you face the challenges of the way you
So we're asking you for the magic answer here, Mark. So we've got a changing workforce, we've got different types of working, flexible, agile working. What do you do as the FM?
Panic.
Wing it.
No, I think that a lot of people would be surprised to know that at Facebook we don't have agile working. Everybody has a fixed desk. Every single person has a desk listed in a space view map where everybody knows where somebody sits. But what we provide is a completely flexible working environment. We have Wi-Fi points everywhere, and there was a big issue. There's no Wi-Fi in the toilets. Who needs Wi-Fi in the toilets? But we now have Wi-Fi in the toilets. So, but yeah, there's sofas, there's hammocks, there's lounges, there's VW tents. There's anywhere that you find comfortable to work. It's available to you. And there's no questions asked. You can work there, you can work at your desk. We give the staff at Facebook the complete variety. You can go wherever you want to be comfortable to do your job. And whether that's in an office, in a meeting room, on a sofa, in a hammock, you have the flexibility there. And the easiest way to give the staff what they need is ask. We generally do ask. If we're going through a change or space planning, we set up a committee of key stakeholders in the office, and we ask them what it is their teams need to be more effective in work. And a lot of them say, take some desks away, add more desks in. We want 20 people in a row. We want to split these teams up into clusters of 2. And we listen to what the needs are. We don't try to second guess what it is they want, because what typically would happen is we'll design it and they'll change it sort of after a week or 2. So we keep flexible, and we work with key stakeholders to deliver the space that they want to work in. What do you mean by sites I don't control? Sorry. Yeah, so we have a couple of serviced offices in London now, but we work very closely with the companies to make sure that the initial design is Facebook-led. So we actually provide the furniture at our cost. We actually work with them hand in hand on design. So we typically won't take 2 or 3 small offices in a serviced office. We'll tend to take a floor and redesign that floor to give the staff there the same look and feel that they could expect in any Facebook environment. So even if it's a serviced office, a short-term home, we try to deliver that to a high standard so that everybody has the same look and feel. If we're bringing a client or a potential interview candidate into a Facebook space, we want them to go away with a good impression of our office environment.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for one more question. Simi, I think we might need a microphone. No?
I can shout.
Okay.
My voice is loud enough. Just touching on that last point, actually, we've got some really exciting, I've worked in a few firms and organisations, and we've got some really exciting clients that are really good to their people in terms of creating their spaces to help them get the best out of them. But why is it that you think that as FM providers, we don't do that for our own people? A bit controversial, but I go to lots of clients and I go to lots of, I work on lots of tests and it's brilliant, amazing. But as FM providers, they're not really funky, modern, I don't know.
Great question. So I don't know if everybody heard that, but some of our clients are in funky, amazing spaces doing great stuff, and then as service providers in FM, we're not. We're not, are we? And why is that?
I'm going to answer that. As an internal service provider with my FM team, we've got a programme in government called The Way We Work, which is TW3, because we have a bit of jargon. But it's all about agile working, flexible working, and despite the fact that government's seen as a Luddite in this area, it's actually doing quite an awful lot in that space. And so we were the first pilots, the FM team. So the FM team are fully mobile. They've all got their iPhones, their laptops. They can work anywhere, and they do work anywhere. And it is totally agile. And we don't have fixed desks anywhere. And actually, what a really good thing that's come out of that, it's really hard to book meetings because you can't get everyone in one space in one time, which is a bonus for me. But it is happening. It is happening in the FM space. And actually, we need to own it. We absolutely do. We need to show that us in FM can do it because we're the ones that are spouting on about it. And if we can't do it ourselves, then, we've got to embrace it ourselves. Absolutely, as an industry, we've got to embrace it and show that we can use it. But it's a really good thing for us.
Simi, I think sadly sometimes it comes down to money because actually you're driven to provide the service in an organisation, and I've often been to site visits with service providers who I admire enormously, and I've gone to their office for their own team and found they haven't invested that money because it's not seen as a key priority. I think it's a really important point that you raise because the more motivated people are, the more they live and breathe the space that they're in and the more they think they're looked after, the better service they can deliver. But I think sometimes it generally comes down to it. Sadly, at that point in time, it's not a financial priority.
Yeah, I mean, we use service providers at Facebook also, and those guys are really dynamic. They're bringing to the table really inspiring ideas that we're changing the way we work. So I think there is a shift happening. I also look at some of the serviced offices I'm now occupying. Companies such as the Office Group and WeWork are really sort of pioneering and changing the way service office is for businesses. They're really funky, cool environments to be working in. So I think that there is a shift, and sort of FM sort of moving forward quite rapidly actually. So fingers crossed next time we meet up there'll be more innovation coming from FM.
I don't know whether I'm talking at cross purposes. I think FM is one of the most inspirational environments, and I think the people in FM are amazing, whether they're service providers or the client side. What I was hearing from Simi was some of the service providers themselves aren't investing in the space for their particular teams. They have amazingly creative people who out in the client space are doing innovative, fantastic things. But what we need is that shift change within the service providers themselves to support their people, some of whom will be doing it. But my experience, not everybody is, because your key purpose is to provide that service on somebody else's site.
I'm just going to add one more thing to this, because the real driver for everyone here is about the reduction in property cost. This is the real driver of flexible and agile working, because we actually want to get, and it's the same for government, it's the same for private sector, it'll be the same for the service providers. You actually don't want people, apart from Facebook, who probably do, and Google, I think, most of us don't actually want people sitting on a desk in a very expensive office in London. And that's the real driver. And so while that's the top driver, we've got all the tools available to us to actually make that happen, and we really need to grasp it as the FM industry.
I think that's a subject for a whole other panel debate, because I'm not sure I agree at all, but there you go. We need to wrap up. The guys are going to be around for most of the day. I know Mark's got a nip off later on, but do take the opportunity to catch up with them if you have any burning questions. Just want to sum up some of the key points that I heard from our panel, that some of the key things we need to consider when we're adapting our style to suit other people is that tact is the secret weapon, I think Mark said, for any FM, that we need to be very careful of the language we use with people and the terminology we use to make sure that we're adapting to suit their style. We need to be pithy with a TH, because less is more. So let's be very, very direct with people and let's give them the information they need. And we should share reasons why. So even if we don't have the answer, we should be very honest with people and tell them when we think we will have the answer. And I think the key thing for me, particularly when we were talking about meetings, is always start with the end in mind. Know the outcome you want to get. And it's like anything. So I would hope that all of you here today have actually decided what you want to get out of the day. Because if you haven't, you might be wasting your time. So think very carefully, if you haven't already, about what do you want to look back on at the end of the dinner this evening and be pleased with that you've achieved during today? Is it people you want to meet? Is it particular things you want to find out about? So be very clear about what you want. So I want to say a very big thank you again to Nelson Mandela, Baby Spice, and the Prime Minister David Cameron. Thank you.